Welcome again to the Kofford Books AuthorCast. In the AuthorCast, we briefly introduce our authors and provide some basic information about the books they publish and how those books contribute to Mormon studies and Mormon writing. With me today is Brant Gardner, the author of Traditions of the Fathers, the Book of Mormon as History. Brant specializes in Mesoamerican ethnohistory and is also the author of a 6-volume commentary on the Book of Mormon called Second Witness, Analytical and Contextual Commentary on the Book of Mormon, and The Gift and Power, Translating the Book of Mormon, both from Greg Kofford Books. Brant, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First, this might be a somewhat common question, particularly from those who have read your prior books. You've already written 2 scholarly works on the Book of Mormon, one of them a massive 6-volume commentary. What does this book say that you haven't already said?
Much of what happens in this book is distilling out of the 6-volume commentary the history parts. So there's a lot of overlap between the history of what I think happened in the Book of Mormon and reported in Second Witness and what we have in Traditions of the Fathers. The difference is in Traditions of the Fathers, it is much more compact. The information is all in the same place. The topics are together, and then it's organized so that it flows chronologically rather than in the order of the books of the Book of Mormon. In addition to that, I've learned a couple of things since Second Witness was published, and so those kinds of things are in the book as well.
Now, you titled the subtitle of the book is The Book of Mormon as History, as opposed to, were you thinking The Book of Mormon in History? And if so, like, what is the distinction there between those two concepts? Once
upon a time, I actually thought the subtitle would be In History and As History, the idea being that you would look at the Book of Mormon in a chronological format and the way it fits against history, and then as history, as a book that actually reflects real human people that lived at a particular time and place. What I'm hoping with the shortened version is that people understand it better and realize that what we're looking at is how the Book of Mormon interplays with the known history of a particular time and at the specific, or a particular place, and at the specific times that the Book of Mormon indicates that certain actions have happened.
Who comprises the audience you have in mind, or the audiences you have in mind for this book?
I would certainly hope that it would be audiences. I would hope that faithful members of the church will be interested in reading the book to be able to get a better picture of what people were like at that time period. I know when we read the New Testament, having a background where we can see them against the land in which they lived and the clothing they wore, the culture they lived in, the mindset that they had that affects the way they wrote and the way they thought. Those kinds of things enrich our understanding of the New Testament. I really hope that it does the same kind of thing for the Book of Mormon. For other people in Mormon studies, I hope it provides them a good model of how we can proceed with looking at the data and being able to make reasonable and solid comparisons between what we see in the text of the Book of Mormon and what we understand from archaeology and ethnohistory of Mesoamerica.
There are a considerable number of books that look at the Book of Mormon and historicity. How does this book stand out in that crowd? Are there ways in which the book kind of honors that tradition of looking and comparing the Book of Mormon with history, and ways that it distinguishes itself from those kinds of books?
It's certainly in the intellectual tradition. Those are the mentors and the people whose works I've read before we start this one. It is a different book and intended to be different because it is, first of all, one that explicitly puts forth a methodology that is a little bit more rigorous than what we've had in the past. Explains the reasons why we have to be more careful drawing comparisons between anything that happens in Mesoamerica and something in the Book of Mormon. There are conditions that have to be met in order for it to qualify as something that gives us a linkage between the Book of Mormon text and something that was happening in the New World. So I do hope that methodologically it will separate itself from other things that have gone on before. I hope that the chronological framework allows people to understand how the Book of Mormon changes dynamically through time, and that certain things that were important and relevant at certain times were not necessarily important at others, but there are certain crucial junctures in time where they match up with the events that we know for Mesoamerica. So the chronology becomes important, and we haven't seen that kind of thing before. And then finally, there are a couple of places where I discuss ideas that have come from those books that have talked about historicity. There are ideas that we really cannot support, and as an LDS community, if we're serious about the Book of Mormon, there are certain things that we really have to jettison, and one of those is the Stella Isapa 5, or Isapa 5 Stella from, again, the other location of Isapa, called the Tree of Life, the Tree of Life. It just isn't connected to the Book of Mormon. The other one, of course, that's very popular is Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec white god, and there really is no connection there at all. And those are things where I lay out the reasons and hope that we can understand that while there are really good things we can talk about, we really have to stop talking about the ones for which there really is no good evidence.
As an author, as I've spoken with other authors, they always say that there's at least one or two things that they learned in the writing of their book that they didn't understand before. And I'm not talking about merely research and data points, but kind of an overall broader concepts of this, either the subject matter that they were writing about or the writing process itself. Could you give us a couple of ideas, or just one or two ideas about some of the things that you learned in the process of writing this book?
I think the most interesting one for me was the precision at which certain events at certain time periods converge between descriptions in the Book of Mormon and the known events of the time. Some of those things I had seen before, but when you put the emphasis on the chronology, it really points out that there are a lot of things that happen in the Book of Mormon that happen because of the specific time and place where those events were occurring, and they would not have occurred earlier or later in those particular locations. And that includes several things from the Old World as well as the New.
I've been speaking with Brant Gardner, the author of Traditions of the Fathers, the Book of Mormon as History, available from Greg Kofford Books, being published on August 6th. Price will be $34.95 for the paperback version. Brant, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.